Dorothy Bulac Eriksen. The things that she is best known for can get any nerd excited, from DC and Marvel films and TV, Hunger Games, Planet of the Apes, Tron, Buffy, Godzilla, The Muppets, Hook, Pirates of the Caribbean, Jumanji, Hocus Pocus, and most recently Star Trek. And we are very lucky to have her here to talk about what she does for the entertainment industry. So welcome.
I guess I should, first of all, I completely forgot I worked on those things. So it was like, wow, I did that.
You did.
But I'm a specialty costume key person in the union, the 705 union. And what a specialty key costume person does, say a loose definition of that is that we create, excuse me, anything from superheroes, creatures, spacesuits, but it really can be any kind of costume that requires special fabric manipulation. So that could be high fashion clothes to streetwear to just really anything that requires some special touches to it. So to create that, I use a myriad of techniques and materials and substrates to achieve that end goal. And I know classification of specialty, there are, special. So no two of us are alike. So you shouldn't assume that we all have the same skill set. So this, as far as skills, we should know how to manipulate fabric in different ways. We work with glues, various glues. There are some specialty that dye. They work with textiles and manipulate and texture and paint those. You might know metallurgy, 3D printing, screen printing, sheet work, leather work, sheet work as in sheet foam construction, to 3D printing, if I haven't said that already. So as far as my strengths, I am primarily a pattern maker, and also I was formerly a fashion designer. So I think the designers appreciate my eye, if you will, of how to go about the project in that way. And sometimes I'm asked to work on just one or two areas in the costumes, or it's that I'm in charge of the whole construction of it from soup to nuts. And either way, I love work in any of those kind of scenarios. But I think people don't realize that it's not a linear direction as to how a costume gets made. I think it's a little bit more of a nuanced concept where that's the reality is more nuanced. I come to a job and I have a myriad of wealth of a library of samples, as you all know, Beth, and sometimes I will show the designer that she'll go and sort through my samples and say, oh, I like this sample and I want to design the costume around this, or she'll take a sample and say, I want you to riff on that or different. And then you also work with the conceptual illustrator, the shopper, because she comes up with different that we might get inspired. So it's never linear. It's a lot of back and forth.
Do you want to talk a little bit about your patterning process? Since you mentioned that, the way you do it is really smart and unique, I think.
I think I approach it like a normal pattern maker would, but sometimes I'm not building towards the body, building away from the body. Sometimes I'm making it not look like there's a human inside of it. I think that I've always said that my career is based on onions. And I always say, honor the onion. And what I mean by that, and as a tailor, you understand that too, is that I am always dealing with layers. So when you have layers on a curve, you know that the outside layer is bigger than the inside layer. So you have to accommodate for that. So usually my pattern making, I start patterning the base layer, but then I have to onionize it to create things that, and make sure that it gets bigger and understand that's how physics happens.
Makes sense. Well, what got you into costumes in the first place?
I was lucky, and I'm old enough to have in middle school have home ec classes in sewing, and then of course then I kept going with it in high school. I was also fortunate that they offered a costume design class and a fashion design class, which I'm sure they don't do anymore. So I was very grateful for that. And then afterwards I went to Fashion Institute of Design and Merchandising as a fashion design major. And I always did costumes, but I thought my goal, my aim is fashion design. But just right after school, I got a job making costumes. It was for this animatronic company. You think Disneyland, Pirates of the Caribbean, those kind of dark rides, or Chuck E. Cheese. So they're the robotic characters. So that required a very interesting way of patterning, because these things are asymmetrical. They have certain movements, and they are also secured onto the ground or to the floor, and they don't get up. So it's like dressing an unruly child that will cooperate. So you're able to get it, pattern it around, but also remove it in a way that it's not going to help you. So it's lots of zippers and Velcro. So that was very interesting. And then I also did, I learned how to make walk around costumes. So then the next thing that happened was another friend of mine said, oh, I'm working on this really low budget film, and I was wondering if you could help me. And I thought, great, I've never worked on a movie before, but that should be fun. So I helped him out. I had no idea what I was doing, but I thought, oh, this is great. It was post-apocalyptic. And then 3 weeks before we were supposed to start shooting, he left to work on a Michael Jackson video, and I was left holding a bag. So I was the designer, the supervisor, the on-set costumer, and made all the costumes. And and you know what, I just realized too that I was driving the costume truck. So I guess I was a team.
So many.
And all for $400 a week. You know, talk about trial by fire. Consequently, I'm best friends still with all those people I worked with. So what that taught me, though, is that I did not want to be the designer. I thought my goal was to be a costume designer, fashion designer, but I quickly learned, all before this was, I was 23, that there are more creative jobs besides the designer. I think most people think it's just the designer, and she pushes a button and these things get made. So that is not and so I had to decide, is it more important for me to have the notoriety, or is it more important for me to have a creative day job and not get the credit? Although getting credit is great sometimes when you get it. So there you go.
That's pretty awesome. How about what was the first costume you ever made?
Well, when I was still in school, there was a man, Greg Lavoie, who went to FITM, and he wanted to hire somebody who was an alumni, who was to the school because he was an alum, to do the patterns and to make it. And so he was at the time a country western singer designer. So I made blouses for a very young Reba McEntire, who had the biggest hair in Puppetland. I just remember her headshot. She had huge hair. And then also Roseanne Cash, who was Johnny Cash's daughter. She was very popular in the early 80s. And I remember I made her costume for the Country Music Awards.
Do you want to talk about your latest project that you've worked on?
Yes, well, of course, as you know, I am working on Star Trek Picard, and I can't talk specifically about what I'm working on, or I will be killed, or at the very least sued by Paramount Plus. But I'll just say that I'm working on some costumes for characters I'm sure the fanboys will be very happy about. I guess I could say that I worked on creating the new Borg Queen. I can say that because they released the trailer and everybody knows that there's a new Borg Queen. So I worked on that, and that just thrills me to no end.
Speaking of Borg and incredibly detailed stuff, what's the most detailed thing you've ever worked on?
I have to say it's probably on Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 2. These were, every single costume had to be fabricated because it's not something you could pull from the costume houses. I don't have any of my samples here, but I have a little doll. Here, I'm going to show you. Let's see if I can see it. Here is the Star-Lord.
How cool is that?
It's this amazing company who does really accurate depictions of the costumes and the characters. It's really amazing. So I'm able to show you, I don't know if you could see all these bits right here. This is, it's funny with Marvel too, is that Marvel is a comic book company, but they never give us a back view. They are just like, whatever. So, we have to still kind of come up with ideas here. And a lot of it is just, Marilyn Madsen is a wonderful pattern maker, and she would pattern the pants, the trousers, the duster in general, but then she would say, okay, this is a Dorothy area. And so I would just have to come up with stuff here. So this is the Star-Lord. Oops, his little Walkman is loose there. And then also here's Nebula. Nebula is so wonderful. Karen Gillan is so wonderful. She has a great figure to play up. She's all tall, and anything you put on her looks great. But she was so much fun because there's all this detail and so much fun. I mean, I wish you could see closer what it was, but that was such a joy.
Most glamorous thing you've ever worked on?
Well, I would say it was season 1 of Star Trek Picard. It was the first season, Christine Beaslin Clark came to me and said, Dorothy, there's a new villain and her name is Bjayzl, and chalk it up to Star Trek names. And she said, you're just gonna love her. And she brought a mood board full of these aquatic spiny references. And it was wonderful. And I think what we came up with was ephemeral yet fierce. And she liked to call her the evil space ballerina. She was just so elegant and pretty, but she was evil. So that was the one I had so much fun with. And that was Bjayzl is what I based this knitting pattern off of, because it was spiny, ephemeral yet fierce.
What do you think the simplest thing you ever made that had the greatest impact? Sorry, the cat has the zoomies. Good thing he's
the simplest is probably this movie called Devil in a Blue Dress. It was a Denzel Washington film. It was a film noir, and Jennifer Beals literally played the devil in a blue dress, and I made her blue dress. So it was a two-tone 40s dress, but it had a bird trapuntoed on the waist, and so that was a very simple look, but it was very important to have her in a blue dress.
What do you think took the most prototypes to get to the final product?
Oh, hands down, it's Thor. Oh God. That was Thor specifically for Avengers 3 and 4. When we were working on these things, they didn't have names. After we were done with it, they came up with Infinity War and Endgame, and we didn't know what we were working on. It was just back-to-back Avengers shows. And right when we started Makovsky said, "Hey, Dorothy, this is your chance. Mr. Hemsworth wants to be able to get out of his costume by himself, which is unheard of. They are so complicated, these costumes." I thought, oh man, what am I going to do? Oh, okay, so I have my Thor costume right here, my little hot toy. He lost his hand there. There, it goes like this, but it came off. So I was able to put a center front zipper in it. It's clandestine though. I use clandestine a lot. There's always clandestine stuff going on in costumes, as you know.
True.
So I knew I had to put it in the front, and it flips over, but I have to secure it somehow. And I knew I wanted to somehow employ that they have these are called rondelles, or as we lovingly call it, Thor's teats. And I thought, we have to be able to figure out how to use this. So I literally had a light bulb moment. I said, oh, okay, on my sewing machine is this little light bulb called a bayonet light bulb, where you twist it a quarter turn and then you can remove it. And I thought, that's got to be some way, instead of like round, twist and twist and twist like a regular light bulb, just twist it off. So I would talk to my friend Dominic Derasmo, who's also a specialty costumer. He is in charge. His specialty is milling hard bits and things like that. So he has a mill and a lathe, and I told him my idea, and he just shook his head. He said, oh, no, I've tried that before. The problem is you can twist it and come off, or twist and come on, but it doesn't stay. It dances around. I said, oh, that's too bad. I go back to my station. He comes back to see me in 15 minutes, and he's got a prototype already. Sometimes that's what you got to be pushed to, where you think I can't do this anymore. And he was able to do it, but what he employed were magnets. So that magnet kept things where it needed to go. And that also reaffirms what I've always known, that magnets are not the magic cure. It works in tandem with something else, but it cannot be the only way to close things. So we did many iterations of this. I think we had 4 prototypes. Marilyn did the trousers. She had at least 5, but we got it done. He was on film. We shot him. His costume's established. And then Mr. Hemsworth just said, I just feel like I just don't have enough pec curvature. I want a little bit more definition. Oh, we've already established your costume. So we had to quickly resculpt some pecs and mold it and output it and glue on a second type of, phase out the pec and put a new one on. And the funny thing is that when they were making these hot toys, they saw that there were 2 different pecs, 2 different costumes. So when you get this toy, he has 2 sets of pecs. So you can change it out. And they thought, well, maybe he wears them for when he goes out to dinner or different occasions. Who knows? But, we're the only really the ones that know about it. And now the world knows about it.
What's a costume that you worked on that isn't what it looks like?
Okay. I would put a twist on that question. I would say what people normally, I would say it's Baby Groot, which I also have a little form here, a little doll. He's my favorite. He's my favorite because most people know he's a CGI character. However, he is still created. He still has to be sculpted and made. A costume has to be made for him. And I had to make 2 of them. One was for the Groot puppet that was on set that the actors related to and could act against. The other one went to the visual effects department with my pattern and the fabrics and notions so they could scan that and reassemble it in the computer, if you will. And the funny thing was, though, because he's so small, this is the actual scale that he is. This is the hot toy that all these bits is like, oh, only I know what those things are. They're like Christmas ribbon and, charms that I cut up and turned inside out. And, so that's only I know what those things are. So it's my whole career is about using conventional things and using them in unconventional ways.
What are some of your favorite tools to use while working?
Well, this might seem prosaic, but I would say it's my weighted rawhide mallet. I mean, it's a good old hammer. I have to punch holes in things and on things all the time, but you really can't use metal on metal. It will ruin your tools. So that you use a rawhide mallet, so it's more gentler. And but mine I love because it's weighted, so I need less strokes to achieve the thing. But I have no idea if they make them anymore. I got mine 40 years ago, and I've never seen them since. So I'd say that's my number one tool.
What are some of your favorite materials to work with?
I hands down, it has to be Copydex. Copydex is a latex glue from England, and I always say, if it's good enough for English school children, it's good enough for me. What I love about it, it has very low vapor of just anything kind of toxic. It's a very little ammonia smell, but it's something I don't have to wear my respirator. I can work with other people when I'm around them, which is very important. What's great about it, it grabs fabric like crazy, but it will also rub off your fingers like magic.
What was the hardest thing for you to learn to do?
I actually think it's still hard to do. It's something that's a challenge every single time. And it's the relationship to the body, to the sleeve. It's the arm's eye. You have to hit that sweet spot of something that's fitted with not a whole lot of excess material, but then you want to be able to give the actor mobility. And a gusset isn't always the like cure all for everything. You just have to get that right combination and the right rotation of the sleeve and all that business.
What is an industry secret you wish you knew when you first started?
I would say I'll say it again. It's honor the onion. Definitely. I talked about it earlier. It's knowing that when you get out further and layers, it gets bigger. So I've talked about it before. It's when you do flat patterns, it's great. But then if you start to do any kind of stacking, and then you put it on a curve, it will be a hot mess. So that's what I wish people would know how to do.
I know you've been in fitting rooms, and you're well known for being a good person in them. So I'd love to hear your advice on, fitting room advice.
Oh, fitting room advice. I would say it's about the actor. So it's not about you. So you're secondary and helpful to the process, but be watchful and observant. But it's also important to see how the person is standing. Do they slouch? Do they, they're, especially with superheroes, they're always standing. They illustrate them in these wonderful poses, but in reality, then we need to see them when they're really kind of what we have to compensate for when we see them in person. So that's, I think, something that's really important to see how they stand. And I used to dread going for fittings, but now after Star Trek, I actually kind of enjoy it because these people are wacky. They're they're fun. The stories they tell. So I'm beginning to enjoy it. The least favorite thing I like to do is take measurements. And I would say the main advice is don't trust anybody else's measurements. Take your own measurements.
You've worked on so many wonderful things. What do you have any favorites that you've made?
Well, staying with Star Trek, I love that it has to be Spock's volcano suit in Star Trek Into Darkness. I mean, come on, Spock. I as a Star Trek nerd, that's the be all end all. I feel like after I did that, everything is gravy, because that was really challenging too, because consisted of, the bodysuit was screen printed leather that we quilted around tubes or cords, and then we removed the cords and we stacked all that quilting. And then there are tiles that are kind of squares. They look like they're all the same, but each tile is different from the neighbor's tile. So each one is numbered and literally glued and screwed individually. And also, that was something is interesting about it, is that I asked my boss about it. He said, just copper plating the tiles cost $26,000 just to plate the tiles. I mean, it's just crazy, but you know, it's Spock. He's worth it, right? But I think for hands down, my most favorite job was working with the Muppets. They did a reboot of the Muppet Show called Muppets Tonight. And I have such stories about that. I had no life because it was just literally, they write the script on Monday, you start Tuesday, you're making it, they've changed the script, and Wednesday they've cut it, but you start shooting Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, you shoot. But there were things that were like, they did a skit called Bay of Pigs Watch. And so I had Spamela Hamderson. I had to make a bathing suit for Spamela, very voluptuous pig. And then I will never forget, the designer came to me and said, okay, we're going to be doing pigs in space tomorrow. It's either going to be, I need for you to make a big cape with the trope of the science fiction collar and you know, big shoulders, and it has to, if we don't know who it's going to be yet, they haven't decided. It's either going to be Carrie Fisher, Claudia Fisher, or Miss Piggy, but go for it because it starts tomorrow and you just got to start making it. So I had to figure out you know, contingency plans, how to make fit all those three people. I think it ended up being Vendela, who was a supermodel at the time, but I loved it because they're Muppets, so you could stick pins into them and they wouldn't complain. And all the guest actors were on their best behavior because they were fans too. So it was just a love fest.
Do you want to talk a little bit more about your motivation of staying with film rather than going back to design or anything like that?
Well, it's interesting that you know, I said no to being a costume designer, a fashion designer, but with COVID and what happened in the transition in between jobs, you have to figure out, and being creative doesn't stop there. So I would say it's you know, doing my line of knitwear patterns. It's creating, I don't know if you can see it, but I did a line of, or it just created these. So here's my tuxedo made out of Converse uppers and things like that. But it's basically the challenge. I like the challenge of what film does, of just, and I would say too, about as far as my career, is that don't just say no to something just because you've never done it before. And so that's what film and television offers me. I also like that you're working with new people all the time. So I get inspired by other people and what they do, as opposed to if I was working in the garment industry, it's the same people all the time. And it cycles very high up here, and it, instead of this big crescendo and then it's done.
What is a technique or task that gets you super excited?
Oh, I think that it's when the designer comes to me and gives me a mood board or says, this is the tone of the costume, excuse me, and I want you to riff on that. And she trusts me enough to just, you know, and the R&D process is my absolute favorite. And just, I feel free and I just go for it.
What do you think is the most challenging part of your job?
I would say it's frustrating when I'm not hired at the beginning of the costume process, especially with a superhero or a creature. It used to be that they would have the sculptors sculpt the bits, they would mold it, and they have the bits, and then they'd think about hiring me, and then I'd have to figure out how to put these things together. And the way to do it is to hire me at the very beginning of the project, so I'm able to pattern the bodysuit, figure out the non-glamorous things of how are we attaching these things and have them ready to receive these pieces. But then I'm also deciding proportionally how big these shapes should be, and approximately what size and shape, to then give to the 3D printer people or the sculptors and say, these are your parameters, so they can work on it at the same time that I'm working on it. So then it'll be a meeting of the minds at the very end. And that saves a lot of time and money, and you get a better looking costume. But I would say what drives me crazy is when I get a sketch and it denies that the human being bends, B-E-N-D-S. Because everybody pays attention on a superhero costume of the strong points, like the chest, the shoulder, the elbows, the knees. But what should really be addressed is the unglamorous points, like the inside of the elbow, the back of the knees, the underneath the arms. And I think the number one area, especially with the superhero costume, is the abdomen, because there's nothing that negates the superhero-iness of a costume than seeing a big wedge of fabric folded right in the abdomen. And the solution is not to make things tighter. It's actually an opportunity to innovate for those areas, to maybe have something telescope or to have an intentional crush. I remember I was working on, I was in the fitting with Brie Larson on Captain Marvel, and I told her that, and she said, oh, that would make a really good name for a garage band, Intentional Crush.
So I know you've been in the union a while. How did you originally get into the union?
It was, my first union job was Batman Returns. They had previously hired a team to work on the penguin suit, the bodysuit, but they weren't happy with it. So they let them go, and that enabled them to get a waiver to hire me, to have me in there. But that was really, that's over 30 years ago. So there were very few specialty costumers back then. So I was in charge of assembling the bat suit and making the penguin bodies. And there were also other things, like there was a bat cape hang glider, because that's what happens in those kind of things. And also there was a specific bodysuit I had to make for the penguin, because he had to jump off a bridge and into the water. And if he had just worn his bat suit, he would have either like sunk like a stone, or I think more would have happened. He would have bobbed, and then, slowly sunk. It just would not have worked. So I created a lobster trap, if you will, of a body, so that he would instantly, the water would go through. But they had to get another stuntman for the role, the position, because Danny DeVito's stuntman couldn't swim. And I kid you not, his name, it was Richard Drown. So I don't know, the chicken or the egg of, like, he decided he just didn't want to learn how to swim, or I don't know what, but they had to get somebody else. But that was a very great anecdotal story.
What role have mentors played in your career?
Oh, I've said this before about people, because there are many, but I would actually say the people that I find are mentors are actually the sewers that I work with. They have more talent and expertise in their pinkies than I have in my whole body. And I can think of several that, and some of them have now retired, but I'm smart enough to listen to what they say. because, and also again, that plays into the importance of collaboration, and it is not from here and it goes down to here. It's a back and forth where they actually then tell me this is not possible, or you should try it this way, and you've got to listen to them. And I feel that they are our unsung heroes.
What advice would you like to give to students who would want to follow in your footsteps?
Oh, I think that it's see if you can get jobs in the special effects makeup shops. I learned more in the walk around companies. If you can get jobs in the walk around companies, I know that people probably think these are low rent or costumes, but my skills and the skill sets that I learned and I honed during those times. I was the supervisor at Shafton's, which was a walk around company, for 3 years, and they are invaluable to me. But also, as you know, what I would suggest is, as through your career and you're creating these samples, keep these samples, create a library, so that when you're talking about a potential for a costume, you can talk to the designer and say, well, you know what? I have something that might interest you. So you don't have to reinvent the wheel. You have something that you say, oh, here's this, even if you want to go in another direction. But it's a starting off point. It begins the conversation.
What kind of education would you recommend?
Ooh, I would say it's amazing to me as specialty costumers how few of us know how to do pattern making. So I would say you are ahead of the game if you know how to do pattern drafting, pattern making, and draping. I went to FITM, but I also can recommend going to LA Trade Tech. I have peers that I work with that are amazing in the industry, a very affordable way to do things. So I definitely think that can be a way to go.
When you're working with new people, what kind of skills would you like to see them have?
I would say, again, if they have some background in making walk around costumes, I know that they know foam, they know glues, they know layers and onioning, because they've had to do that. But almost important is just, do I get along with that person? Do I think that we are a good fit as far as personality? Really, I could teach anybody anything they need to know, but if they have a bad attitude, can't do it.
What kinds of things do you think are important for creating a successful collaborative environment?
Oh, I would say when the designer, when the designer and all the people involved realize that and understand that in the creative process there are no mistakes. There are only prototypes, because if you try to get it right the first time around, it will, first of all, it'll choke you up. It'll freeze you up in thinking, I have to do it only one way. And what is that one way? Like you're sculpting the thing that is not David, like Michelangelo. It doesn't work that way. You have to approach it like it is a prototype, and it frees you up to make mistakes, but they're not mistakes, they're happy accidents. It's like you learn from things. So you hopefully your bosses and your designer knows that this is a journey and it's a process, and you're not going to get it right the first time.
How do you choose which projects or employers to work for?
I just make sure that that they understand it's a collaborative environment, that it has to be that way. I mean, pure and simple. And we keep talking about it's collaboration. It always makes me laugh when I watch Project Runway and they say, oh, it's a group challenge. And I can't wait to just be the only. I said, no, the way to do it is to bounce ideas off each other and be inspired by someone else. It's a wonderful, soft, cushy place to be in. It's rejuvenating to see other people's. You can't create these things in a vacuum.
What are some red flags you've seen as far as a working environment goes?
I would say I hopefully hear ahead of time if someone is got a big ego or is a screamer. Life's too short to be working with people like that. Also, it's a red flag if they don't understand and don't accommodate when some toxic chemicals and they don't understand that and don't accommodate for that. So it's not only just for my health, it's for everyone else. I'm responsible for everybody else's health that I work around. So that's if they don't understand that then they don't understand what you have to deal with these kind of costumes. I think a lot of people think too that it's just the stuff that gives off an odor, but there are things like dye stuffs that are just powder. If that stuff's airborne, it gets in your lungs. And what was it? Somebody told me it's that you dye your costume, you dye your liver. You have to, it's your body has to process all that stuff, and it's not good.
What, on the other end of the spectrum, what do you think are the hallmarks of a really well-run show or workroom?
I think I know it's a good shop when the higher ups above me honor the talents of the sewers and the because they are the unsung heroes and know what they need and accommodate for and pay them correctly, because I just get so upset when they don't understand the value of a good sewer, of a good you won't get a good it won't matter if I know what I'm doing if the person that helps us can't sew or they won't hire the talented people and honor how amazing they are. And again, they're my mentors. I just love them.
How do you like to negotiate when you're initially considering an offer of work?
I would just have to say, you just have to stick to your guns with your rate. And I can do that now because I have this wealth of knowledge and people know my work, but also that I need to say, you pay my rate, I get to choose who works in my my group. There was a job that she was a lovely designer, but she decided she hired everybody before that I even got there, and it was a challenge. So I need to hire who I want, on my team, and then also I want to make sure that they are paid correctly.
Do you have any advice for dealing with big personalities?
Oh, all I can say is that I think we've all realized that every job we've ever had is never a mistake and that you learn from it. And one of the things I did when I was 19 was I thought, I was in between colleges. I was going to San Diego State as a home ec major, but they cut the faculty in half. So I said I couldn't base a whole career off of one sewing class. So I took a kind of a break, and I ended up being a nanny for 3 kids. There was like a 7-year-old, a 4-year-old, and a 6-month-old. And I used that wealth of knowledge of having to deal with children. And then I realized that's the hardest job. And realized, I got to stick to my guns and stay with college. But as far as actors, yeah, you kind of need to know how to, corral those sheep and or corral the cats, and it's tough. You're always going to run into people that that rub you the wrong way. But it's kind of like when you go to school and you get a teacher that you don't like, but they're eventually going to go away. You won't have them forever. So, and that's also what I like about our jobs, is that it's finite. You can walk away after it'll end.
Is there anything that you would want the public in general to know more about what you do, or what you wish producers would know, perhaps?
I again would emphasize that there is more than just the designer. I remember we got a special clearance for my friend to bring his son who had diabetes, and he was a big Marvel fan, and he wanted to see how the process was. So we showed it to him. And at the end, I talked to his dad, who's a friend of mine, and he said, I don't know what I was thinking of. I kept thinking it was just going to be one of these things where the costumes would come down on a conveyor belt or something. You just push a button and something gets extruded, and I think, no, somebody's got to make this stuff. So it's almost like when you do your best job, that's actually when they just think it's easy. That I always say this, I always say it wrong incorrectly, but let's see if I can say it right. It's like, you don't show them that you can walk on water, because then they're going to expect you to get them a cup of coffee across the lake in 5 minutes. They just think, oh, it's easy. She walked on water, so just go get me a cup of coffee. So it's kind of frustrating that if you do your job well, they think it's easy. The best advice somebody told me is that, and frustrates me, is that sometimes, and it works many times, where you hire more, if you need to get it done and done quickly, you hire more people to help. But there is a gestation process that has to happen to get these things done, and you can't cut that short. And this production manager told me this once. She said, one man can get 9 women pregnant, but that doesn't mean you can have a baby in a month. So, you throw more people, doesn't mean it happens quicker.
Is there anything else that you would like to share?
I would say that I'm in the twilight of my career as a specialty costumer. I'm seeing the light at the end of the tunnel. And as my friend Dominic, who I talked about earlier, says, hopefully it's not a train coming down on the other side of the tunnel at you. But COVID and the lockdown helped facilitate me coming. I was going to wait till retirement, but I'm doing my own knitting patterns. I'm selling them on Ravelry. They can look up my name and find them that way. But I think I'm going to be retiring in 2 years. My husband just retired this week, so I want to join him in the retireness. And that, when I am going to retire, I am selling everything. I'm selling all my tools, every piece of equipment, all my fabrics, all my substrates, everything. So come on down for the sale, because it's all going, and I'm just going to be knitting. Going to be knitting somewhere, with a cat in the backyard. And I want to pass it all off on everybody else. So come for the fire sale.
Yeah, well, thank you so much. Hopefully people will get a lot from this. And I will see you tomorrow, I think.
Yeah.
Thank you so much for sharing.
That was fun.